At the beginning of everything, a very beautiful girl is born in a hospital ward, and some time later, she is eating ice cream with her friends, when suddenly one of the girls notices some cream on her face and tells her about it. Then Mona wipes the cream off her cheek and gives an angelic smile, leaving everyone blushing with her cuteness. And at another moment, while they are playing tag, one of the boys goes up to Moni and asks her to catch him, which goes against the spirit of the game where everyone should run away from her. But instead, everyone approaches her, asking the girl to catch them. And at that moment, Mona begins to describe herself as a queen bee because she always stands out wherever she goes. And after a few years, she wakes up early to her alarm clock ringing and then runs to school. At that moment, everyone around turns their necks to look at her because they are amazed by Mona's beauty. And when she arrives at school, the ass-kissing continues because everyone stops what they are doing just to wish her a good morning, who in turn responds to everyone. Then she goes to the classroom where she finds a boy named Kuroiwa Medaka, and then she wishes him good morning. But unlike the others, the boy has a slightly more downbeat aura and answers her without a smile on his face like the other students were doing. And upon seeing that he is different from the others, Mona doesn't understand anything and tries to bring up another subject with him, hoping to see him falling at her feet like everyone else. At this point, she comments on the fact that he is not wearing a uniform and asks how he managed to enter the classroom like that. Meanwhile, the other boys in the classroom are jealous when they see Medaka receiving all that attention from Mona. But on the other hand, Medaka doesn't like this interaction at all and tells the girl to leave him alone. Upon hearing this, Mona becomes even more confused because him despising her presence is already something that doesn't make the slightest sense in her head. So she decides to take a peek at what the boy is seeing on his cell phone and discovers that he likes cats. At this point, Mona tries to approach him a more playful way, making cat gestures and trying to be cute. When checking Medaka's facial reactions, Mona notices that he at least showed a less dead reaction. But soon after, he tells her to stop talking to him unless the subject is really necessary. And upon hearing more of this refusal, Mona becomes even more uncomfortable. Then she remembers the various phases of her life, and since childhood, she has always been everyone's favorite, in addition to receiving several confessions. Therefore, Mona has become accustomed to always receiving attention and adoration from everyone around her. And upon realizing that Medaka does not show the slightest interest in her, even though she tries very hard, Mona runs away upset. And sometime later, she decides to go further by climbing a ladder and showing her legs in the hope of getting the boy's attention. However, even with all this provocation, Medaka pretends not to see and simply walks past her, ignoring her. The girl, totally frustrated with this Cinderella who doesn't care about her, becomes destabilized by his attitude and ends up falling into the floor, takes advantage of the situation to try to make the boy react in some way. Not even that makes him stop and pay attention. Instead, he continues on his way, swearing that he didn't see anything she tried to show him. Going to class, everything goes normally until suddenly Mona tells Miguel that she's feeling sick and asks to go to the infirmary. The teacher then asks for someone to accompany her and a girl gets up to help her. However, Mona acts quickly, throwing herself on top of Medaka and asking him to go with her. As soon as they reach a more private place, she corners him against the wall. Medaka soon realizes that she's never been sick. Meanwhile, Mona reveals that the nurse is always absent at that time of day, which means they'll have some time alone. Trying to seduce him, Mona starts to feel bad about herself. After all, Medaka is the first man who's made her go so far just to get his approval. Faced with that embarrassing situation, Mona asks him how he feels about her, because the fact that he is always cold makes her believe that Medaka hates her. He then clarifies that he doesn't hate her or anything like that. Noticing that he looks a little red with the situation, Mona considers this a victory. But soon after, Medaka shows her usual cold expression again. Determined not to give up, she pulls him to the bed to continue the conversation. However, in the middle of this, he pushes her and they both end up falling together on the bed. Even with her on top of him, Medaka still looks at her with a certain contempt. This makes her more paranoid because for her, there is no way her charms could be so ineffective. Especially because Mona sees herself as a true queen bee who should be able to attract anyone she wants. Seeing that there is no other way out, she decides to go for her last card and ends up showing him the airbags. Having done this, Mona hopes that this will be enough to finally win Medaka over. But instead he keeps composure and doesn't let any inappropriate thoughts take over her mind. When she realizes that not even that worked, Mona starts crying indignantly. Rolling to the edge of the bed, then Medaka. Already foreseeing that she will fall, he rushes to rescue her. But as soon as Mona is supported, she becomes embarrassed for being so close to him with their faces practically glued. She then asks Medaka to get off her because that is showing too much. He also becomes embarrassed and makes it clear that he had no wrong intentions towards her. Having said that, he leaves the infirmary covering his face in shame. But soon after he returns and suggests that Mona protect herself and show her body only to someone she really likes. Seeing the outcome of all this, the girl realizes that she started to like him more than the other way around. But soon after, she doesn't understand why she liked this situation so much. After a while, Mona returns to the classroom and is surrounded by the other students who ask if she is okay. She answers yes and goes back to sitting in her wallet. As soon as she thanks Medaka for her help, Mona realizes that she can't look him in the eye and wonders about it. After all, this feeling is almost as if she's starting to like him. In view of this, Mona decides on a new goal for her life. She will do everything to win his heart. The next day, when she returns to school, she tries to talk to him again. However, Medaka exchanges few words with her and then goes back to ignoring her as usual. In addition, when she passes by a girl, the girl looks at him and blushes too. In physical education class, Mona tries to get his attention by doing some stretches wearing a somewhat tight outfit and asks the boy to join her in the exercises. However, he continues to ignore her. Seeing that she hasn't made any progress so far, Mona thinks of another strategy to get his attention. She then lifts her shirt, exposing her belly button, hoping that he will notice her. Seeing her like this, Medaka quickly turns her back to keep her mind free of thoughts inappropriate. Mona, upon noticing that he had left, decided to follow him. On the way, she tried to convince herself that she was not going after him because of him, but out of pure curiosity about the guy who could resist her charms. As soon as she reached the water fountain where Medaka was, she approached the tap and started drinking water, with no intention of getting his attention. However, this time Medaka looked at her with a different, softer look, but soon turned her back, avoiding eye contact for a long time. Mona noticed this subtle change in his gaze and decided to provoke him a little more by pouring water on his clothes. As soon as she saw her shirt sticking to her body, Medaka blushed while Mona realized that she had gone too far in trying to gain Medaka's approval and ended up feeling embarrassed. Then Medaka took off her own shirt and covered it to prevent anyone from seeing more than they should. Mona then goes back to being all silly with this gesture of his. Later, while walking home, Medaka is approached by two classmates who criticize him for always treating Mona rudely, even more so because she is just trying to be nice to him. The three stop at a park to talk better, and then Medaka reveals that he will be the heir to a sacred temple. For this reason, he was forbidden from getting too close to girls because he needs to keep his spirit pure and free from inappropriate thoughts. Upon hearing this, his classmates deduce that Medaka has never had a girlfriend. He then explains that he spent his entire life living only with old people and goats in his house. Because of this, he never knew how he should interact with girls. With this explanation, the two finally understand why Medaka treated Mona that way. Meanwhile, Medaka remembers that the only cute girls he has ever seen were the ones who appeared on TV. That is why he feels that being in the city will be a real challenge since the place is full of temptations. His classmates suggest that he at least try treat Mona a little better because that won't condemn her spirit in any way. Upon hearing this, Medaka says that she will try to follow their advice. However, in his mind, he feels completely confused about whether to continue interacting with Mona or not. He knows that if he continues to keep in touch with her, he could end up falling in love, which for him would be the end. Because his life is entirely dedicated to religion, which by the way prohibits any kind of romantic involvement. He then remembers the moments he spent with her and soon realizes that impure thoughts begin to invade his mind. For a moment he imagines himself going on a date with her, but soon after forces himself to push these thoughts away. Seeing this, his classmates finally understand why Medaka always makes that disgusted face. In fact, he is just trying to keep his mind clear and get rid of any improper ideas. Meanwhile, Medaka explains that she decided to enroll in a school to train her mind to resist any kind of impure stimulus. The next day, Mona goes to him once again and returns the shirt he had lent her the day before previous. Medaka keeps her serious expression as always, but Mona gets close to her ear and whispers, asking if she should have returned the shirt with her perfume. At that moment, the boy almost loses control, trying to clear his mind of any dirty thoughts. Meanwhile, Mona gets even more excited to make him fall in love and promises that she will not give up on this goal. The next day, Mona wakes up and gets ready to go to school. Just like before, people continue to stare at every step she takes. After all, the magic of the queen bee is still going strong. When she arrives at school during art class, she is approached by the same boys as always. Just like before, they continue to compliment her appearance, saying how charming she is. However, Mona doesn't give a damn about them because her attention is completely focused on Medaka. She then calls him and asks what he thinks of the pose she is doing. When looking at her, Medaka quickly looks away and tries to focus on keeping her mind clear. The next day, Mona wakes up to go to school. She continues to be the center of attention wherever she goes. As soon as she arrives at art class, the boy approaches her, enchanted by her presence. He compliments her beauty as usual, but the girl doesn't pay the slightest attention, preferring to focus on Medaka, asking what he thinks of the pose she's doing. Looking at her, Medaka tries to keep her mind clear once again, which ends up irritating Mona absurdly, who insists that he use her as a model for his drawing. The boy next door, overcome by jealousy, almost pulls out his own hair, envying Medaka's opportunity, while Mona imposes a condition, saying that she'll do anything, but making it clear that the artistic knot might go a little too far. The next moment, she laughs and says it was a joke, but Medaka is already praying for forgiveness for the thoughts that came to her mind. When he ignores her provocation, the other boy approaches and comments on how funny Mona is, and thinking about the situation better, she decides that this will be the last time she receives a look of contempt from him. After all, the art assignment requires the students to draw the classmates sitting next to them, and since they are sitting next to each other at the desk, Medaka will have to draw her, whether she wants to or not. Upon realizing this advantage, Mona feels she has won, because now she will be able to capture his attention even more. Meanwhile, Medaka tries to hide her admiration, because to him, Mona continues to be stunning, and when she notices that her thoughts are getting out of control, she struggles to stay focused. However, Mona goes on the attack once again, striking a bold pose that leaves the room in shock, revealing part of her armpits. When she notices that Medaka is blushing, he sees it as a test to strengthen his discipline as heir to the temple, taking a deep breath until he regains his composure. He decides to treat the task of drawing her as something normal, without giving room for inappropriate thoughts. Meanwhile, a girl named Haruno begins to get distracted by the interaction between the two, losing focus on the model she should draw. Instead of continuing her work, she watches Mona with a look full of sweetness, which makes her find the situation strange, but she doesn't pay much attention to it. Then, curious about the progress of the drawing, Mona asks Medaka what part he is focusing on, and he answers that it is the neck. When she realizes that he is analyzing this area so intensely, Mona begins to get nervous, feeling her mind fill with inappropriate thoughts. Heat takes over her body, and unable to deal with it, she runs out of the room in a hurry, using the excuse that she is not feeling well. After that, she takes refuge in the bathroom, reflecting that that was the only time he really looked at her attentively, considering all the interactions they had. Mona feels frustrated because she believes that Medaka should observe her like that all the time, and not just when it's a school project. Meanwhile, Medaka looks at her own drawing with a thoughtful look, until suddenly, the two boys from before come closer to see her work and realize that he had to analyze it very well to reach that level of detail. Panicked, Medaka denies any second meaning and tries to push the inappropriate thoughts out of her head. Later, he goes to the library, and when trying to pick up a book for research, his hand accidentally touches Mona's, who by coincidence or fate was there at the same time, resulting in a classic romance scene. Without hesitation, Mona simply hands him the book and leaves the place, avoiding prolonging that interaction that could lead her to think stupid things. After all, just that accidental touch was enough to mess with her mind like an earthquake. Meanwhile, Mona remains still, trying to understand the situation, until she realizes that the same girl from before is watching her. The moment Mona returns her gaze, the girl gets scared and runs away. Soon after, envy takes over the library, as Mona decides to sit next to Medaka to read with him. While the two focus on reading, several people watch from afar and mutter angrily, wishing they were in the boys' place to make the most of her presence and those light accidental touches. Haruno, on the other hand, keeps her gaze fixed on Mona, increasingly fascinated. It is clear that she wants to say something, but hesitates, which leaves Mona intrigued. Not understanding why Haruno hides instead of approaching him, she reflects on their last interactions and remembers having seen her watching her in art class. At that time, Mona was also next to Medaka, which leads her to a conclusion. Perhaps Haruno is not looking at her, but at Medaka, harboring some interest in him. Feeling that she is now in a silent dispute over the boy, Mona realizes that, despite spending so much time by his side, he rarely looks back at her. Determined to change the scenario, she analyzes Haruno's behavior, imagining that Medaka might be more interested in discreet and intellectual girls who spend hours immersed in books. After a detailed observation, Mona decides to imitate her, going so far as to wear glasses to reinforce her new identity. As soon as she appears with her new look, the library patrons are ecstatic once again, but she doesn't care about them in the slightest. Her only concern is to find out how Medaka is reacting to this change, because, in her head, his heart must be racing at this point in the game. Meanwhile, he silently compliments Mona mentally, thinking that her look really suits her. However, these words won't leave his head, and Mona, realizing that she can tease him even more, decides to take her boldness to the next level. Without hesitation, she slides the tip of her finger up his leg, slowly moving up and lightly caressing him to see how far she can go with this game. My friends, this girl wants something, but she doesn't know how to ask for it. It's unbelievable. Medaka, in turn, goes back to crossing herself, while Mona decides to be more direct and asks him what he thinks of her new look. Instead of answering the question, Medaka just mentions that her foot is touching him and, without thinking twice, leaves the place to try to maintain self-control. My friend, the man must be climbing Everest right now. But even that doesn't solve the problem, and Mona is shocked. Soon after, she realizes that Haruno is still watching her and concludes that the girl really is very interested in Medaka. This leads Mona to start following Haruno everywhere, determined to better understand her behavior. During this discreet pursuit, she realizes that Haruno is extremely helpful, watering the school plants and erasing the blackboard without anyone having to ask. Realizing that the girl is, in fact, just a kind person by nature, Mona decides to continue watching her until she finds some flaw that can be used against her. After all, only then will she be sure that Haruno will have no chance of winning over Medaka. However, when she catches her changing and notices that her proportions are incredibly balanced and well distributed, Mona realizes that she has a serious rival ahead of her. Meanwhile, the other girls begin to compliment Haruno, saying that they are jealous of her body, since she usually hides her curves, but when she changes, she reveals herself to be a true beauty. Haruno, however, is completely embarrassed, demonstrating absurd modesty, something that Mona clearly does not possess. Later, at another point, Mona reflects on her own events, admitting that Haruno is a much kinder and more adorable girl than she is. Furthermore, with Medaka being naturally more reserved, it is likely that Haruno will have more chances, since the two seem to be a better match. For those who don't know, Haruno has a bit of a country boy demeanor, so if you're watching on Crunchyroll, the subtitles may be a bit messed up or overly regionalized with a weird accent. That said, Mona realizes that she needs to try much harder to win Medaka over, otherwise Haruno will end up stealing him from her. Suddenly, when receiving a book from a classmate, Mona thanks him, saying that she loves him, and the boy is so embarrassed that he runs away, completely euphoric, as if he had just won the lottery. Upon seeing this unexpected reaction, Mona realizes that she has never treated Medaka with this same kind of affection, much less telling him that she loves him. So, she decides to turn this into her new strategy for winning him over. While Medaka is on the terrace, calm and with her mind completely serene, Mona goes there and purposely drops her scarf on the floor, forcing Medaka to pick it up for her. The moment he does so, she tries to thank him in the same way she did with the other boy earlier, telling him that she loves him. However, when she tries to say this directly to Medaka, Mona ends up freezing completely. Suddenly, the wind starts to blow even stronger, causing her skirt to flap too much. Desperate, she holds her skirt with all her strength and, instead of confessing her love, ends up calling him a scoundrel. Medaka, confused, says that she didn't see anything, and Mona, embarrassed, decides to leave this conversation for another time. As she goes down the stairs, she feels that she has lost the chance to get over Haruno. A month has passed since she started studying at that school, and Mona finds herself increasingly frustrated. So far, Medaka has not shown the slightest sign of interest in her, which deeply irritates her. To make matters worse, she is chosen to be class representative alongside Haruno, her biggest competitor. When she is alone with the girl, Mona realizes that she cannot understand her real intentions. Haruno seems to be completely comfortable, even sharing space with Mona, despite the fact that the three of them technically form a love triangle. Thinking a little more, Mona comes to the conclusion that Haruno does not even see her as a rival. This makes her furious, as she feels underestimated. During the conversation, Haruno accidentally leaves the screen of her cell phone visible for a few seconds, and, upon realizing this, quickly hides the device. Scared, she says that Mona is the last person who can see what is there. The comment only makes Mona even more curious, and she insists that Haruno show her what she is hiding. However, Haruna continues to refuse and claims that if Mona looks at it, she will hate her forever. Determined to find out the secret, Mona starts chasing the girl, insisting that it's okay as long as Haruna keeps her hands off her Medaka. In the middle of this crazy chase, the two end up falling to the ground, and Mona finally manages to grab Haruna's cell phone. When looking through the photo gallery, she discovers something completely unexpected. Haruna has several pictures of her saved on her cell phone, all taken without Mona even noticing. Upon realizing that she was caught, Haruna starts to cry and confesses that, ever since the entrance ceremony, she has always been a great admirer of Mona. That's why she kept those pictures, so she could see them even when she wasn't at school. Trying to ease the tension, Haruna says that she only has 300 pictures of her, something completely normal, something that ordinary people do. Faced with this bizarre revelation, Mona feels enormous relief when she realizes that Haruna was not interested in Medaka. But let's face it, that's crazy Jesus. Then, when she remembers that she had asked Haruna to take her hands off Medaka, Mona realizes that she has given in. Trying to fix the situation, she says that she was talking about Medaka's fish, but this ridiculous excuse doesn't convince anyone. Haruna, impatient, says that she has noticed how Mona has changed since Medaka arrived at school. Mona continues to try to escape with lame excuses, but Haruna insists that she will now support her in winning the boy over because she knows that she likes him. She believes that the cultural festival will be a good opportunity to show off to him, but upon hearing this, Mona tries to change the subject, saying once again that she doesn't like Medaka the way Haruno is imagining. At that moment, she remembers again the moment when she asked Haruno to take his hands off Medaka and realizes that this made the girl misunderstand everything about her. After all, Mona's only goal is to make him fall in love with her. Right after class, Mona goes with Haruno to check out some clothes. While they choose what to wear, Haruno talks about a legend that involves her school's cultural festival, known as the Passage of Destiny, also called the Bridge of Love. When Mona hears this, she doesn't understand what it's about, so Haruno calls her to the window and shows her the connection between two buildings, which they call a bridge. She then explains that, according to legend, if a couple holds hands on that bridge during the festival, they will both fall in love with each other forever. After saying this, Haruno hopes that Mona will be able to hold Medaka's hand there so that their relationship will grow stronger. Mona, once again, tries to argue that they have nothing, but in the middle of the conversation, Haruno is pulled somewhere else. As for Mona, she realizes that she won't be able to convince Haruno that she doesn't have feelings for him unless she can make Medaka fall in love with her as soon as possible. With this in mind, she starts trying on different outfits, trying to find a look that will make her irresistible. Only then will she be able to make Medaka fall in love with her quickly. However, after trying on a few looks, she discards them all and tells herself that she needs to find the perfect outfit, something that will make Medaka's heart race faster than a rifle in Rio de Janeiro. The scriptwriter is kidding my little state just because there are gunshots every now and then doesn't mean we go through them all the time. After a little more insistence, she finally finds the perfect outfit, a Playboy bunny costume. However, as soon as she looks in the mirror, she realizes that the outfit reveals a little too much, which makes her uncomfortable. She then starts to consider changing her clothes, but before she can do so, Medaka enters the room and sees her dressed like that. Mona turns redder than a beet and turns away immediately. Medaka also becomes embarrassed and starts blushing, asking why she is wearing that outfit. Trying to keep her composure, Mona makes up that she is just trying out some clothes as part of the school committee's duties. But inside, she realizes that she has just created a stratospheric disaster. Medaka, trying to compose herself, drops the papers she was carrying and says that her only job there was to just leave the documents in the room. So he makes it clear that he will leave in a second. But as he gathers the papers, Mona hears Haruno's voice approaching and realizes that if she is caught dressed like that next to Medaka, Haruno's suspicions will only increase. Before Haruno enters the room, Mona pulls Medaka and hides with him among the clothes. However, as the two get too close, the airbag activates and almost hits the protagonist in the face, leaving the boy completely speechless. Meanwhile, Haruno gathers the papers from the floor, wondering how they got there. Mona, in turn, becomes tense and, being so close to Medaka, hopes that he can't feel her accelerated heartbeat. After all, she is already doing him too much favor by clinging to him like that. Medaka, on the other hand, tries her best to clear her mind of any inappropriate thoughts and, in the end, end, manages to concentrate on staying calm. However, when she feels his breath on her ear, Mona starts to feel ticklish and almost lets out a loud laugh. She barely manages to control herself. Meanwhile, Haruno is pulled away again and gets distracted by something else. A girl who is there asks for Mona, but Haruno replies that she doesn't know where she could have gone, since the room was empty when she arrived. As soon as the two leave, Mona and Medaka finally manage to get out of the cramped hiding place where they were. Mona sighs in relief and then realizes that she has just given something very precious to the boy. Then, she looks at him, trying to find out if that was enough to make him fall in love with her. In the end, she ends up disappointed, because our cold and calculating protagonist continues with a clear mind, without letting himself be carried away by inappropriate thoughts, remaining firm on the path of righteousness and holiness. Seeing her reaction, Mona realizes that she really overdid it by wearing such a revealing outfit, especially since there is nothing cute about a Playboy bunny costume. She starts to feel bad, completely defeated. But noticing the awkward atmosphere that has formed and how dejected Mona seems, Medaka decides to say something. He comments that, in fact, she looks cute in that outfit, but remembers that she is showing a little more skin than she should. After saying this, he leaves the room completely red. Mona reflects on what she has just heard and notices that her heart is beating faster than usual. This leaves her confused, since she has never seen Medaka as someone so attractive. Meanwhile, Medaka, upon remembering that he called her cute, becomes embarrassed and bows to keep her spirit pure. The next morning, Mona arrives at class confident, since even Medaka has recognized that she is cute. For her, this means that her mission of making him surrender to her charms is practically accomplished. She tries to talk to him, believing that he will answer her with a smile on his face. However, he looks at her with the same look as always, maintaining his serene and unshakable posture. With that, Mona realizes that once again she celebrated too soon. When the time for the festival arrives, all the girls wear bunny ears, but without the part that would make the Child Protection Council freak out. They start preparing cakes to sell in the living room, until some girls ask Mona to take a break from the kitchen. She takes the opportunity to call Medaka to rest a little too, but he insists on continuing to work, saying that he is not tired yet. Mona argues that he must be hungry after so much work, so Medaka takes a piece of the bunny cake that is nearby and eats it, saying that it will be enough to keep him energized. However, another boy scolds him for eating the customer's orders. Mona, in turn, realizes that even after calling him cute, Medaka still isn't in the palm of her hand. In fact, she feels like he's distancing himself even more, since now he doesn't even look at her like before. She deduces that he must be embarrassed for having complimented her so suddenly. Suddenly, Haruno appears and asks the two of them to leave the room to advertise the cafe and attract more customers. As they walk through the festival, they pass by a haunted house-themed event. Mona, frightened, suggests that they look for customers elsewhere, but when she looks at Medaka, she notices that her eyes are glowing. Curious, she asks if he wants to go into the room. Medaka says it doesn't matter, but Mona can tell by the look in his eyes that he really wants to go in. She decides to face her fear, convincing herself that there is nothing to be afraid of. After all, the decoration was done by students, which makes her feel calmer. However, when she enters and sees the students' scary costumes and makeup, Mona is terrified like a child, realizing that they really managed to make the place terrifying. Meanwhile, Medaka admires the decoration and feels the cold air that runs through the place, making the atmosphere even scarier. Mona finds it strange that Medaka is so excited in a place like this. As they walk, Mona's skirt gets caught in one of the tombs. She asks for a second to get free, but Medaka, distracted, continues to observe the details of the room. However, when he finally realizes that Mona is trapped, he notices that her skirt has gone up a little more than it should. He quickly covers his eyes so as not to see anything other than what is necessary. Mona, desperate, runs out of the room, shouting to everyone that she hates haunted houses, still taking with her the sign that got stuck to her. Meanwhile, Haruno remains in the kitchen, hoping that Mona is doing well with Medaka, without realizing that she is letting all the cupcakes burn. Mona complains that Haruno's plan to bring her closer to Medaka ended up being a total disaster. But in the midst of her complaints, she cheers up again and decides to make the outing more exciting. To do so, she takes him to eat crepes together. While enjoying the dessert, Medaka notices that some drops of cream remained on her cheek, and warns her about it. Seeing a new opportunity to provoke him, Mona asks him to wipe the cream off for her. But before anything can happen, out of nowhere, a bird flies by and steals the girl's crepe. This only strengthens the theory that Mona has incredible bad luck and was cursed by some vulture in her childhood. Medaka realizes that this stroke of fate actually helped her, as Mona completely forgets the request she had made earlier. Moving on, the two decide to watch a show together. However, since Mona can't see the show properly because of the crowd, she asks Medaka to help her, suggesting that he lift her on his back. But as soon as the guy in front of her turns around, Mona realizes that he is not Medaka. After this incident, they go to another event where they collect balloons to model figures. However, for a change, Mona's balloon bursts, while Medaka's remains intact. At this point, Mona has realized that all her plans to win the boy over are going down the drain. Desperate, she tries to think of some other idea that might please him. But when she looks at her watch, she realizes that the cultural festival is almost over. Now, there is only 1 hour left to try to make something work. As they cross the Bridge of Love, Mona remembers what Haruno told her. According to legend, every couple who crosses that bridge hand in hand is destined to fall in love with each other forever. Meanwhile, back in the kitchen, one of the boys who took responsibility for the crepes makes a culinary disaster and panics, begging for Medaka to be brought back, since he was the only one who could make something decent. As for Asahi, who has kept a sad expression throughout the festival, decides to return to the club. She needs to find a certain someone she has not yet managed to meet at that event. If you want part 4, comment part 4 and subscribe to the channel. See you next time.